Good evening, and welcome to The Caring View, the online health and social care platform free to access for absolutely everybody. Before we get started, if you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and tap that bell. You won't be watching us on Facebook because, believe it or not, as usual, we have errors connecting to Facebook. We will try and figure this out. If you're following us on LinkedIn and watching us on LinkedIn, make sure you do give us a follow and have a look out for all of our events coming up over the coming months. www.thecaringview.co.uk. Find out all of our information on there. Catch up on our podcasts, our episodes. Visit our CQC hub with plenty of information about the new CQC framework, which goes live on Tuesday next week. So, Mark, we must remember for next week's show to touch on this for the rest of the country. So, Midlands and the North, you are all coming under the new CQC framework from Tuesday. So, head over to our website and grab all that free information. Also find out about our sponsors and our suppliers. I'm one of your hosts, I forgot to say. I'm Panel. Mark, hello, our second host.
You okay?
I'm good, thank you very much. I'm good. And tonight we are joined by the ever fabulous Jayne Connery. Say hello, Jayne.
Hello, Jayne. Lovely to be on your show. Thank you for inviting me again.
You're most welcome anytime, Jayne, whatsoever. Mark, have you just fixed Facebook?
I have. It looks like it's going. I'll double check it in the background, but it looks like it's going out, which is good. So
brilliant. If you are on Facebook, make sure you follow us on Facebook as well. Hello, Facebook audience. So tonight we are talking around the benefits of CCTV in social care. Now, Jayne, just before we were going live, we were talking around, the debates about this and how we've usually approached the idea of CCTV in social care. But your stance has changed on that now on your public appearances and your sort of awareness raising regime. So just talk us through that quickly, because I think you were saying no more debate.
No more debates at Care Campaign. I decided that we're going to have constructive conversations instead. And this is about knowing that independent safety monitoring, when I say independent, third party organization doing an overview of a care service. We are collaborating with Care Protect. We are currently working with providers in the sector who are calling it a game changer, particularly in dementia care communities, where people are more vulnerable and carers are more vulnerable because they're working with vulnerable people. It's been incredible. I have to say, I'm getting so much sort of positivity from doing what I do at Care Campaign for the Vulnerable at the moment. From 10 years ago, it's gone absolutely amazing. And we are really now getting providers coming to us saying, tell us more. We want to know more about this. And, we are really getting out there. We advocate transparency. We want to see care providers operate safe services. So it's, while we obviously put the vulnerable person at the helm of what we do, it's equally important to support the provider. And we get providers come to us, we've got families coming to us with issues. But we also want to flip it and say, it's also about highlighting good practice and recognizing good practice, what carers are doing every day, and working with these absolutely inspiring care providers at the moment. And I will name them: Maria Malaband Care Group and Signature Senior Living. I have to say that they're showing such leadership, and it's really just really blown me away that these leaders needed no persuasion. We've just collaborated with them. We've spoken to them. We have shown them the work that we're doing in the sector with families and care homes. And the overall view is it's a no-brainer.
Yeah. No, and it's obviously being heard across the sector. Let's rewind slightly now then. For people who might not know you, Jayne, and the work that you're doing, what is Care Campaign for the Vulnerable?
Well, it started about 12 years, 13 years ago, when I was a daughter in care, and my lovely, now late mother, Ellen, didn't have the best experience in the care services that she was in. Carers, the majority of carers were incredible. A lot of them follow me today, still on Care Campaign for the Vulnerable, and they were inspirational. And that's why I wanted to set up an organisation that would support carers as well, not just families. And I had an issue in a care home where I knew safety monitoring would have brought answers. Simple as that. It would have sort of, you know, having carers be suspended pending a long investigation, you know, a lot of issues that came to the forefront. It was simple for me. If there was safety monitoring, we could have answered that in 5 minutes. So I went to the manager and I sort of said, you know, hey, what about putting in safety monitoring? Have you thought about that? And it was not on my watch. So that struck a nerve. And I thought, you know, you're dealing with very vulnerable people here, and carers that are coming up against some accusations. So to me, it was just, why isn't this happening in the British care system? And I set up Care Campaign for the Vulnerable to work with the sector. And that was something that my father, my late father, had influenced, because I was quite an upset daughter. My mother had unexplained injuries. She was abused, which was proven. And I was upset, bordering on angry that this could have happened. It was a big deal putting her in a care home. She didn't want to go in one. So the guilt was tremendous. So for me, when that happened, I just thought, my father said to me, Jayne, you're not going to get anywhere unless you work with these people. So work with them. And it was the truest thing he said. And from day one, my whole stance has been, let's work with the sector. You know, it's a great sector. Oh my God, I've learned that in 10 years. If I didn't know that 10 years ago, I know it now. It's a fantastic sector. And there are inspirational leaders, people, and it has its challenges. And I see that every day when I support families and carers. But I do not believe that one care provider, not one, wakes up in the morning and thinks, today I'm going to fail my residents. I don't believe that. But there has to be less naivety in the sector, more honesty. What happens behind closed doors, we aren't always in control of. And again, we're dealing with vulnerable people with no voice. And our carers do an amazing job. So for me, it's about positivity. It's about discussion, conversation. And I can't really understand anybody that would negate independent monitoring that's done responsibly, collaboration with families, choice-based system, doesn't have to be on. Families want it, lasting power of attorneys want it, next of kin with best interest decisions, all very responsible. I don't know why one UK care provider would be against it. And we're proving that every day.
Yeah, no, and I want to touch on that. Firstly, 12 years to be campaigning and advocating for it. Well done, because that's over a decade. And I think a lot of people, we know that obviously you've hit kind of brick walls at times and resistance, and, you know, working in social care, I can kind of see sometimes why that would be. And from speaking to kind of frontline care staff around those kind of fears around actually what do you want with that CCTV and monitoring and bits and pieces. But yeah, I think firstly, obviously, I commend you for continuing to go in. With regards to power of attorney, say you've got somebody that maybe lacks capacity, and the next of kin wants something in place, whatever that kind of monitoring is, and the care home. How do you go about those conversations with care providers, or the support that you provide? Because that's one thing we obviously haven't touched on, is the support that you provide to relatives and obviously others that are caring for people in the homes.
That's a really good question. Yeah, we do deal. We have families come to us, even, you know, we have it every month. Families come to us and say, we've asked the provider to put in a camera. And they say, but they've said no. So we're going to place in a hidden one. And I think I'm in a situation where if a family believes that their loved ones are being abused or something's not right with their loved one, of course, it's their right to put in a hidden camera, because the priority has to be the vulnerable person.
No, absolutely.
But we've had cases where families have not picked up on any abuse cases, but just one or two issues with the care plan not being carried out. And they've very innocently gone to the care provider and said, look, you know, we put in a hidden camera. This is what we've seen. You know, it's not high scale, but there are issues here. And there's been evictions because the provider will say, well, the trust is broken down. You've had to put in a hidden camera. So we have had to go into these meetings and I'm not exaggerating, but beg for an extension to the eviction so that family can find an alternative placement. So there are absolute issues with, and I'm not against it for the right reasons, but there are issues with hidden cameras, because the abuse, if it were to happen, will already happen. We want a preventative measure, so we want overt. We want overt cameras that are responsibly installed, with everybody knowing what's happening, everybody knowing where that is, and they will then understand what their role is, what is expected of them. And we have proven that with providers that are working with us and collaborating with us. And there's a whole host of issues that we see through hidden camera. And again, I will make it clear, because I know people like to sometimes pick out things. I agree with that. If the provider has said, no, we're not, you know, we don't accept. If families choose to put in a hidden camera, then that's their choice. I did it with my mother, and my mother was evicted within 12 days. And there was failings on that camera. So when I support families, I've gone through it. I've gone through 2 evictions. I've gone through failings, gone through abuse, gone through great care. My mum had the most amazing care in the care homes that she was in as well. It's part of the job. It's part of what can go wrong in care. And any manager that does not own up to that is naive. And
it's so hard, isn't it? Because I think if all of us took our social care hats off, actually, and like you've said, Jayne, you've been there and you've lived it. Actually, if I take my hat off and I think about care for my parents, actually 100% I'd want them to have that. So you've got that. And it's not about spot checking, and it's not about kind of actually monitoring. It's actually just for that reassurance. And if something has happened, actually, how did it happen? Let's learn a lesson from that. Did mum and dad, you know, have a fall? What was it that happened?
And that again is something I want to pick up on. At Care Campaign for the Vulnerable, 90% of our issues are unwitnessed injuries and unwitnessed incidents. And this is something that can bring providers huge headaches. Why? Why do I know that? Because I see them with their head in their hands in a best interest meeting, in a crisis meeting, and saying, why did that happen? Why has this happened? So we see providers and care home managers in despair. I go into coroner courts representing families, and I see carers bursting into tears, giving their account of what they think what happened in a care home when an elderly person passed away through an unwitnessed incident. Can you imagine what that's like for a carer? Young carers as well, that I have actually questioned in coroners on behalf of the family. it is soul destroying. And I certainly know, because carers have contacted me. I'm happy to show this correspondence to anyone that wants to see it, and said we'll never work in care again. It's soul destroying that the technology is out there and it can bring so much positivity.
No, 100%. Adam looks like he's having a disco where he is.
I'm apologising in advance in case I have a power call. All my lights have just started flickering. Whether there's some sort
You
of
were
like,
having a disco there, Adam.
I wish I was. So I'm hoping it's not going to be too bad. Do you mind if I come in, Mark, in case I get
no, go on.
In case I get cut off. So, Jayne, obviously, from your point of view, there's a no-brainer as to why we would have the CCTV in the homes, and we can see from a safety aspect that they would deliver. You know, it keeps you covered, it helps keep other people safe and other people covered. What are some of the barriers that you have seen in getting this in place in care homes? What are some of the barriers you see providers coming to you with saying, but what about this? And I can't because of this. What are those main things?
I think that the main barrier when we sit down and talk to some providers starts with leadership. And I don't want to get controversial, because I know everyone's got their role, everyone's got their pressures, everyone's got their role to play out. And I know that from working with providers, understanding their role. But I do think that it starts and stops with the mentality of the CEO. And that I have come to understand, that you can knock your head against a brick wall all day long talking about safety and independent monitoring. But if that provider doesn't want to know, they don't want to know. And nothing will change that. So for me, thankfully, when providers reach out to us, they're for it. They're halfway there, but they want to know what the independent monitoring is, because they say, well, what's the difference between us putting it in-house and an independent? Well, independent, you'll get support with compliance, audit, installation, monitoring. That will all be done. And it's done comprehensively, responsibly. So I started to advocate independent monitoring, and I don't want to sort of go off track, but I think it's important people understand that I came across so many providers saying, you're supporting safety monitoring, CCTV, but we're putting it up and we're being told to take it down because of the Care Quality Commission. We've installed it wrong. We've got problems with compliance. How can we overcome this? So I did my homework 7 years ago, and I reached out to organisations saying, look, I'm supposed to be supporting monitoring here. What's the best? How can we support these providers? Because they're coming to me, I haven't got a clue. I just know that safety monitoring is there to protect people. And I came across Care Protect. And they have mentored me, and they have absolutely supported me and educated me on what this type of technology can do in the care sector. And that's my role now. My role is to support independent monitoring to care providers. And I really hope, and I could be naive here, but I don't think I am. I always said it will take one big, prolific care provider to take this initiative, and the rest will have to follow. And I believe that.
Yeah, well, when you were talking about the two providers that you've been working with, I did wonder that, because I think social care is so big. It's made up of so many different organisations and providers, but at the same time, it's so intricate. And I think once one person starts, it kind of just domino effects, doesn't it? And you kind of see that. And I think you are right. I think if it was to be in an outstanding CQC report, or even in a requires improvement one, that would just ripple, because I think so many of us, I mean, I'm guilty of myself. I look at all those reports and I read and I think, oh, they've got welded in this. What can we copy? Oh, actually, they've got requires improvement there. What are we doing there? What can we strengthen? And I do think, I mean, when we think back to I'm trying to think back when our very first conversation when we met you must have been at least 2-3, kind of like that conversation that we very first had there compared to kind of what you're doing now and kind of where you're at is actually, you know, so much further forward. And I kind of think actually in another 2-3 years where we will be. I don't think when we talk about regulation, the CQC, and I don't know what it's like in any other part of the UK, but for the CQC, I still don't find that the guidance is really there around what that looks like, what providers need to. You were talking there about providers falling into pit holes, like what actually they need to consider, which is a shame because they're there to regulate us, and you'd think that actually they would have some kind of guidance, easy read for providers just to follow and think, actually, I really want to do this, but where to start?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly know that the Care Quality Commission are sort of supportive of an individual basis of safety monitoring. But we, you know, I think across the sector, this technology as a care assist tool, you know, it's care monitoring. You know, CCTV conjures up all these. I mean, yes, look, I'm not going to wordplay, but you say CCTV, what do you think of? Camera stuck in your face 24/7. No, it's not a spy tool. It's not. It's there to look after you. It's there to make sure carers are protected as well from unfounded allegations. I go into, you know, I've supported carers in tribunals where they've raised incidents of abuse and lost their work. You know, we get, you know, we've had an out of court settlement with one carer. You know, we know, you know, Care Campaign, we're not here just acting as the police saying, oh, providers have to start putting in monitoring. We're seeing every day the reasons and the benefits for it. And my role is to work with the sector. I want to talk to HC1. I want to talk to Barchester. I want to talk to Bupa. I want to talk to Care UK. I want to talk to Four Seasons around a table. I don't want to lambaste them. I don't want to say you're failing providers. They're not. They've got the most incredible workforce. But they've got to sit up and start looking seriously at the positives of this care assist tool. And I'm hell-bent on doing that. And I won't stop until I do.
Yeah, you are right. They're reflecting. And I kind of think about telecare. And actually, we don't mind. And I'm a home care provider, so obviously it's slightly different. And we do have, I think, let's be careful I say, smart monitoring, because mine will go off. We have them on doorbells, we have them around the home, and we don't kind of bat an eyelid. And we don't kind of bat an eyelid around telecare and having sensors left, right, and centre, which actually do a very similar thing in terms of actually has the carer been in that day and is that person being supported? But you are right, it's that connotation. It's a bit like when we talk about AI, people think that robots are going to come in and take over. It's around what that looks like. And actually, a lot of the CCTV these days, you'd hardly even notice there.
Well, I've gone into care homes recently, and I love visiting these homes with the monitoring in the rooms. And these are in private rooms with consent and best interest. And it's a choice-based system. You don't have to have it on. But if families are concerned and conversations are had, then it can be turned on. And it's done responsibly. It's there to help the provider. It's there to help the provider. It's there to make sure that the providers know what's going on in their homes and doing it responsibly and doing it collaboratively. And I yet have to, I mean, I was overwhelmed that, you know, we had MNCG and Signature who came to me and said, we want to do this. There was no persuasion. It was, they were forward-thinking leaders. And you know, I'm excited by that because it's what I said previously. I believe it will be a ripple effect. It will have to be. But we, you know, I'm passionate on wanting to work with these providers, and that's sitting down and talking to them. You know, I don't want anything from it. I'm not getting anything from it. I just want to sit down and say, look, this is what's happening. This is what's coming into us. You know, do you want that to happen to you? Do you want hidden camera footage showing an abuse of an old person under your watch, in your home, your business model? Do you want that? Because if you don't, then you have to deploy independent monitoring. And for us, there's 1,000 reasons why you should have it. 1,000.
So if we've got a care provider So we spoke earlier, or you spoke earlier, about that it's got to come from above. If you've got a registered manager, and you've probably come across this a lot, and we know that when we speak to care rights, and obviously we met them during the pandemic, about what a registered manager thinks should be in place versus what maybe a director or a CEO thinks should be in place. So say you've got a registered manager comes to you and is like, I really want to put some monitoring in place. I've seen the show tonight, I think it's great, but they've got kind of resistance from higher up. What would your kind of advice be to that registered manager? Because obviously the buck obviously doesn't stop with them. It obviously has to go higher. Is there any advice that you would give or anything that you would signpost them to kind of support their conversation with their directors?
Well, it's about conversation, and that's really important. It's about bringing the issues to the forefront: honesty, open transparency, and integrity. And if a care home manager, and I hope there's more than not for independent monitoring systems, come and talk to us in confidence even. And, you know, we will reach out, you know, what we don't want to do, we don't want to step on toes. You know, if the manager comes to us, it's in confidence. And then we can advise, and I would happily sit around a table, private, you know, it won't be on the amount of meetings I've had with providers that I haven't put out. I've had many. So I will have private meetings. I will sit round and do a slideshow of all the unwitnessed incidents and accidents that are happening. I will give all the positives, all the great work that can be picked up, giving carers a boost. It aids in training. Manual handling. We've had so many issues with poor manual handling that providers have looked at the footage and sat down with carers, re-shown it and said, we need some more training here. Come to us. We'll talk to them.
I suppose it all comes down to how we communicate it, doesn't it? Because I know that, so let's look at it from a different point of view for a second. And let's look at it from a carer's point of view, working in a home. Incredibly underpaid, incredibly underappreciated in a sector that is overlooked quite a lot from government funding, and they show up every single day, sometimes in really poor working conditions, sometimes working with people who have got very, very challenging needs, which emotionally is a drain. The manager turns around and goes, by the way, I'm going to put CCTV in. Their first thought is going to be, you don't trust me. And that's why you don't trust us as a team. And one of the hardest things around leading a team is building that trust. So what are the tips you can give us around reassuring people that actually it's not a trust thing, it's more of an enhancing of the service we're providing? Because I just know there'll be people out there listening to this as carers going, oh, another thing to pull us up on, another thing to blame us for. So how do we have that trust conversation?
Absolutely. And that we hear a lot. I would say, and we said it with the providers we're working with, it's about the carers. It's about them. It's about their protection. It's about their safety. It's about unfounded allegations. It's about protecting them and their welfare. And conversations have to be had. And in the work that I've done, the carers are at the forefront of it. Not necessarily the families initially. It's the care staff. They're the most important people in this sector, the care staff. They're the ones that are facing vulnerable people every day, challenging behaviours, aggressive behaviour, through no fault of the vulnerable person. And I know that because I've seen it firsthand. So it's about protecting and safeguarding them, and also it's there to enhance them and enhance their role. I know from the carers that I talk to, and it's easy, again, I can show this. I've got messages coming in every day saying from care staff, from managers, we want this, we want to work with this, and we need to work with this. We've got to get rid of the myth of cameras being stuck up there to spy. Get rid of that. Get that out of your head. That's not what it's about. And it's never been about that. It's about responsible safety monitoring. And it's about for everybody that walks in that home and walks out of it every day. And that's when I give talks in homes, I'm invited in. I give my personal account, but I also give the account of how carers and the wonder of carers made me do the job I do today. It's them that made me do it, because I was a carer and I had to walk out of a room more times than hot dinners when because I had to, because of difficult situations. So I've been in that situation, and I know that if any accusation was against me, it would have killed me. It would have destroyed me.
And I mean, for those of us who manage care and work in care, we've all had those safeguarding alerts where there's been an unidentified bruise or we've not been able to explain something. And that is, something that we need to be able to evidence, and CCTV would be able to help with that. So let's just go and talk about the idea that CCTV doesn't need to be, cameras in your face and at all corners. We've got a comment in the section saying that there are other CCTV/monitoring tools available without a camera on every corner. It's about educating the sector of what is available. Are there other solutions out there? So, I mean, the first thing for me that comes to mind around monitoring and supporting of people is around acoustic monitoring. So, sound monitoring in rooms. What are the other? Is there anything else that you advocate, Jayne, as part of CCTV, or are there any other solutions out there that you think actually are less invasive than cameras in some areas, but really do enhance that monitoring aspect for homes?
Easy answer to that. Anything that enhances safety and transparency in care, I'm for. And I talk to people every day that come to me from organisations, holistic, all sorts of monitoring. I listen. I'm not closed to any idea that will safeguard the sector. However, visual monitoring, independent overview, is vital in the care sector. And the reason being is, and again, I'll go back to what I said earlier. I go to coroner courts and coroners will say there's no evidence, there's no visual evidence. So we're going to have to put it down as either accident or a narrative outcome on the cause of death. There's no visual evidence. So independent safety monitoring will give that visual evidence if any untoward event happened. Now, that's not me against any other technology, any sort of, anything that might be out there. I support anything. But for me, and through the Care Campaign for the Vulnerable, I've seen too many cases where visual evidence has been omitted and it can't be evidenced. Even the innocent, it cannot be evidenced. So Care Campaign for the Vulnerable fully advocates independent safety monitoring. And that's as far as we go to advocate anything. But I'm not against anything that enhances and protects people. But no, nothing does it like independent safety monitoring. And I will say that. Nothing does that. Because I've seen it. I know it doesn't.
Well, I mean, we've got quite a bit of support in the comments as well. So Lillian is saying that, communal areas are must to have CCTV and obviously outside in the back of the buildings. And Jane Borland's come in as well and said, speaking with yourself, Jayne, gave her the confidence to introduce cameras in the communal areas. So it's obviously working out there for a lot of people. Bedrooms. What's your thought on a blanket approach to CCTV in bedrooms, or does it need to be an individual approach? Does a new build home, for example, getting commissioned tomorrow go, well, I tell you what, from day one, we have CCTV in all areas of our home? Or would we be expecting it to be on a case-by-case basis for people moving in? I'm hoping you're still there. You've just gone very black on the screen. I've got Jayne Black, Mark on mute. I'm on my own.
Right. Well, we'll see if Jayne rejoins. Oh, she's still there because I just saw it unmute. Jayne, it might be worth leaving and then rejoining on the link sometimes. But while you do that, we'll have a conversation. I was having a flick around on the Care Campaign for the Vulnerable website, and it's not just kind of the support that Jayne has spoken about tonight that you can kind of see. There's a lot of blogs and case studies, which I actually thought was really good to kind of have a look at. Just trying to go back on the website now. There's a lot of videos, there's links to kind of like legal support. So I think kind of from a provider point of view, but also a relative's point of view, I think there's kind of something there to support. And I think we obviously know, Adam, you and I, from obviously working with Jayne over the last few years, that actually, and I think the comments kind of reinforce this, is that actually if there is a question that you've got, or that, you know, you're not sure, or you've got somebody in your organization that is kind of anti it, that actually you can come to Jayne and to the group and actually ask questions and seek advice.
Oh, totally. I mean, it's such a minefield of an area to be taken lightly. I'm still on the fence myself. I think I do agree that CCTV would be great in communal areas, in corridors. I think the data protection side of things is something that we need to get nailed down. This is where we need Michelle Corrigan on to give us that hand.
You know, I did think this. I was thinking we should have had somebody on to talk about kind of the legalities and bits and pieces.
Yeah, and maybe we should get Michelle back at some point with Jayne so we can go through some of these legalities. So for those who don't know, Michelle Corrigan is from Better Security, Better Care. I hope I've got that right. And does a lot around the data protection toolkit. But it'd be interesting to hear from Michelle around the sort of Freedom of Information Act around data capture, whether carers can request that their images be removed, etc., etc. It'd just be good for us to make sure that our privacy policies are up to date. However, if we went with an independent provider, like Jayne's explaining, a lot of this is pretty much covered for us. Jane Borland in the chat said it's a minefield. I bring up GDPR as well because Curtis has said that they provide monitoring systems which use both thermal monitoring and acoustic monitoring together, which provides a recordable and reliable course of events, also alert to falls and loud noises, but better yet, no GDPR risk for carers or those in care. Curtis, and I'm no expert on this, and again, we need Michelle Corrigan on this. I think because you're recording audio, I still think there's a GDPR aspect to that, and I still think you would need to comply with all aspects of data protection. If I'm wrong, I'd love to know why I'm wrong and how I'm wrong on that. It's just, I would still say that audio recordings of individuals is personal data. So I would just check that out if I were you. But again, let's take these questions up with Michelle Corrigan and see if she can give us some answers in the future, Mark. Jayne, you're back.
I know, I don't know what happened there.
I thought we bored you and you were like, nah, none of this.
No, I apologise. It was the internet. I understand the question that you asked was the fact that about in bedrooms, and this is a really, really important aspect of it. We're working with providers that are doing choice-based. So basically when they're building homes or when they're putting third-party monitoring, they're putting it in all the bedrooms with a choice to have it switched on. So that is something that I so advocate, because then it's a choice-based led system.
No, that's honestly, that's really interesting. The cynic inside me would be going, I wonder whether the choice is accurate and whether we're documenting that choice correctly.
No, it is. I mean, it would be. And again, it's a third-party organisation doing it with all compliance, regulatory.
Sorry, no, I meant whether we're actually offering it as an option for people or just switching it off for the case of switching it off. But that's a really, really interesting approach to that choice-based in all your rooms. What are we looking at cost-wise, Jayne, for this? Because no money, council's going bankrupt, national living wage is going to 11.40 something in April. Most councils, or a lot of councils, provide enhanced rates for real living wage, which is going to be £12, if not more. this year. What's the cost implication for providers?
Well, I want to separate this. I want to separate the private care industry and the little independent care homes, because I think that's really important. It's a bespoke, obviously care providers, care homeowners will have to have a discussion on what they want and tailor it to their needs and what they feel that they need. But I want to sort of touch upon cost and look at cases where providers are fined millions. 1.3 million, a provider was fined for a woman, in a care home, and she, it was extremely cold, and she literally froze. So they were fined $1 million. We've got other situations where providers are fined for neglectful care, and we see this every day. So we look at it again as a responsible measure where this can be prevented. So we have to look at costing and look at it for each provider. So it's difficult to say, because it would be on what they wanted, how many cameras, where they wanted those cameras to be, how often would they want those cameras on, how often would it be a retrospective look in, would it be a 24-hour overview? And I guess the costings do vary, but we certainly know through the providers that we've spoken to that it's money worth spending, and it's not as expensive as one would think. And if providers want to come to Care Campaign for the Vulnerable, we can discuss this with them and give them an overview with Care Protect on how much this will implement, this will cost. But again, I look at it and think, how much will you save by not having to suspend carers? Lengthy, costly investigations that care homes go through every day. It really is, an aspect that we see every day and worth every penny.
Yeah, Adam, you brought in those. There's a couple of comments. Jayne has said, we're a small provider company, and the cost of being able to explain any unexplained falls outweighs the cost of introducing the CCTV. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? Actually, those unexplained moments of care that you just don't know what happened. And Curtis,
also, can I just interject? It's also about, and again, this is not on the high list of what comes first, but let's look at reputational damage. Huge. And I don't need to name recent cases with providers. Huge. The reputational damage. Care homes may having to close because social media, because families are saying no more. We're not allowing this anymore. We want to know what's going on with our loved ones. So reputational damage is something that we see. And that takes a huge financial toll on providers. Not saying, that is something I tend to put on the high priority at Care Campaign. It's certainly the vulnerable person and the carers, but it's something that is brought to our attention. We want providers to say, well, whatever may go wrong, we are putting systems in place to ensure it won't happen again, and that we can deter it or prevent it.
No, absolutely. And I think, we spoke earlier about covert cameras, and I think they're the ones that always end up in the media, on social media, the big hitters.
Yeah.
And you are right with reputational damage. Curtis is in the comments as well. I don't know if you know Curtis, Jayne, or what his background is, but he has put about ballpark figures. I wouldn't know if these are right or not, but £100 to £160 per good quality camera, average of £400 to £500 per recording box. I'm pleased you put that, because I wouldn't have known what an MVR is, plus the labour and cable. So
I know. I think that I with respect to Curtis, I'm sure that's what he's got that information correctly. But I think when we sort of advocate independent monitoring, I think it's a completely different ballpark, and I can help with that. If any provider, and I hope they're listening, any managers are serious about this, come to me. It's not going to cost you a bean. I do all this for nothing. Come to me. I will get all that information for you, and then it's there for you. And I then let you make that decision. It's not my decision, it's your decision. But I'm happy to give you that information for absolutely voluntarily, so that you've got it. As I say, knowledge is power.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when you dropped off, we were talking about your website, and I was talking about the blogs and the news sections. And actually, there's so much resource, whether you're a relative or a provider. But we obviously knew from meeting you that you can get in touch and that you'd be more than willing to support. So
all day long. I mean, it's part of the job I love. I love visiting care homes. I love seeing the work that people are doing. And I've got, I'm not going to sit here and say that it's always rose tinted glasses. It isn't. I deal with some very distressing cases, but I certainly know that managers are affected hugely by that, and carers.
One question I've got, I'm conscious of time. I want to talk about kind of ways people can contact you, but also kind of upcoming events that you've got going on. If providers are thinking about installing something monitoring CCTV, where would you say is the best place to start within the service? If they haven't got the funds to do all the communal areas, the corridors, the lounges, the dining, what one area would you say is the best place to target based on your experience?
Bedrooms, private suites, private communities, and dementia communities.
Thank you very much. So, in terms of what you've got coming up, Jayne, I know that you're at UK Care Week. Adam and I will also be there. Are you able to tell us what, obviously you're talking about CCTV and monitoring, what can anybody that's going to UK Care Week expect if they came along to listen to you talk?
I didn't catch that, sorry.
Oh, what can anybody expect if they come along to UK Care Week and join your session?
Well, we're very excited because we've got the keynote this year. I had it last year, and it was a great chance for me to sort of get in the feel of the keynote. I've not done the keynote before. I've done a panel, but not on my own. But this year we've got a panel, and we've got Kay Cox, CEO of Signature. Hoping we can get Paul Walsh, the COO of Maria Manaband Care Group. We've got Paul Farmer from Care Protect and myself, and we're going to be discussing independent monitoring systems. And what's really exciting about this is I can talk all day, but it's going to be the care providers that are doing it that are going to be talking, and hopefully be question and answers. So that's really exciting for us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Adam, before we close off for tonight, and just anybody listening, if you've got any final questions, please do pop them in the chat and we'll get them answered. Any further questions that you've got, any follow-ups?
I've probably got loads of questions, if I'm honest, because I'm back in provider land now. I'm back in the world of social care, and I get most of the arguments for it. I get most of the points for it. I do see it from a provider point of view. I see it from a resident point of view. I see it from a team member's point of view. I don't know. I think for me, it's just around how, and I've said this already tonight, how do we have those open, honest conversations? How do we not let it deter people moving in? How do we not let it deter people from joining the team? And how do we communicate this in a way that ensures that it's being used for its best effectiveness? I suppose one question I've got around the independent side of things, Jayne, is Who has access to those recordings and who can request access to those recordings if it's not managed by a provider? Because I think one thing that would scare me as a provider is a relative going, well, I want to see video from this room and I want to see video from this room, or I want to see video from the communal
Yeah,
area.
it's
And then I've got this minefield of, but other people
No.
might be involved in that you can't see. What's the sort of
Yeah,
scenario
I mean, I can understand that, because that was when the providers we're working with currently, they had those questions as well. I know that, and I'm sure, you know, when we had providers wanting to see how this worked, where was the data protection care, where was the footage stored? It's all stored. I mean, Care Protect, and again, you know, we've worked with them for 7 years. That they are an organisation that does it all. You know, whatever a provider wants, they will support them. All that footage they have, and it is stored responsibly. And again, if any provider wants to come to me and talk about this, because it's quite complicated, but if they want to come to me, I can give them an absolute overview on that alone. And it is important, and I certainly know that was the questions that came to us from the providers that were interested before they piloted this technology. And it is important to talk about, but I certainly think, just going back to the question that you said earlier about how do we keep the conversation, you know, how do we make people that are coming into the sector understand that this is another negative for them. And I think that's really, really interesting. And I think that we have to keep talking about the safety of care staff as well. And we have to look at how anything that's picked up is picked up by professional safeguard leads, NHS professionals that work for Care Protect. And again, you know, I say Care Protect because I know how they work. I know their validity. I know that they're working extremely professional. I mean, Paul Farmer, who works with me, they collaborate with Care Campaign for the Vulnerable. You know, we work so hard to educate the provider and to make sure that the provider feels supported through all this. That's vital. It's vital that they feel completely protected and supported while they do this in their service.
It is very strange, because I was just reading some of the comments to make sure. We've had one that I'll bring in on the screen that's just come in. When you think somebody's put about body cameras in other professions, and you kind of think outside of social care, if you kind of go to a local authority building, we go in, there's cameras everywhere that's monitoring everybody coming in. And like, you go to the barbers, the hair, wherever you're going, there's a camera. But yet you do go into kind of a social care office, whether that's a home care office in the high street or, you know, a care home, and it's not just there. It is very strange when you think about it from that perspective.
I can understand, and again, I try and see both. I try and balance both. I'm you know, I don't want to be sort of too pig-headed about this. I understand that these are people's homes. I get it. I really, really get it. But they're vulnerable, and we're promoting dementia communities predominantly because these people do not have a voice. And I also think that they're people's homes, but they're also people's places of work. And I think you have to try and balance that slightly. And I do think that I get it. I do understand it. And I can imagine people saying, but it's people's homes, you don't want to go. But we've got to look at, a lot of these are sort of hospitals as well. A lot of these care homes for people with dementia, they're mini hospitals. And they're places where people are being, they're so vulnerable and being cared for. And there has to be an overview if that's what the families want. And we've seen so much negativity in the sector, and it will be there to ensure that the sector is doing what they should be doing, and everybody is working safely and transparently.
Absolutely. And it is a very fine line, especially when you're supporting people. I know you're advocating for dementia villages, but people with capacity and without capacity in communal areas and bits and pieces.
Yeah.
Matthew has popped on. What should be, or what would be the main reasons providers may be hesitant not to install monitoring? What are some of the, maybe the top three that you hear, Jayne?
That's a really good question. I'm glad he asked that. The biggest one that we get is privacy and dignity. They're the two. But what about their privacy? What about their dignity? Okay. I've got a very easy answer. It's one that I do try to understand that. I understand the privacy. I understand that we all want that in life, even when we're vulnerable. But safety has to come first. And we see that. And we understand that if families have an issue, families believe that something's not right, or that there's an issue with any incident, falling, anything like that, if they choose to do it responsibly, then they have the right. If they have lasting power of attorney or best interest, they have the right to deploy independent monitoring. And for me, the privacy and dignity, we understand, but the technology out there today protects that. And where is the dignity in hidden footage that we see every day? Where's that dignity? At least this is done professionally, behind closed doors, and it's done to make sure that people are safe. And that is the priority. So I don't, while I get it, and I'm not going to say I don't, we all want that, but we also want elderly, vulnerable people kept safe. And that is our priority.
Yeah, I dread to think of the lack of dignity that I've experienced being caught on many cameras in nightclubs throughout my youth. What I've been getting up to way back when. Before we close, Chris has brought something up in the comments, which I think is an interesting proposition, actually, and it's around body cams. Is that an alternative solution for us to use in social care, so we can switch them on and off for the people that we're supporting who don't want to be monitored, but actually gives us that first-hand POV as well? Because sometimes CCTV, you're at an angle you can't really see. So is it worth what it is? Because you can't see what's going on behind it. But
yeah, that's a bit of a myth. CCTV at a different angle, not with Care Protect systems. So again, come and talk to us. Because what happened in one abuse case, it was said that abuse happened, they had CCTV, but there was an angle that people were abusing that the camera couldn't find. Care Protect systems, you don't get that. And again, it's about conversation. But I do agree with body cam. I mean, that's a very interesting question, because I've written about body cams. They have their place, but I do think in the sector, I'm absolutely for, because I've seen it work. I'm seeing it work, is independent, which is, instead of being on you, it's an overview. It's an independent overview. But I think anything that can protect people, I'm for. But yeah, we want to see independent monitoring for reasons that we've spoken about on this wonderful podcast. So yeah, but yeah, body cams, I mean, the police use them, and I think mental health hospitals sometimes uses them from memory. So, but I do think when we're dealing with the social care sector, the overview has to be done responsibly and independently.
Yeah. Well, I think it's been a very interesting non-debate tonight. I think it's been a very interesting conversation about how we move this conversation even further forwards. And I'm also really glad that I didn't have a power cut. My lights were flickering for a little while there.
I did.
Well, yes. Yeah, Jayne, you did leave us. My power cut was infectious. It sort of infected your network. Jayne, it's been absolutely great having you with us tonight. No doubt you'll be back on our show in the near future. And I'm really looking forward to catching up at UK Care Week. If you're not going to be too busy being flogged by people asking all about CCTV and how they can get it in their homes, we will try and wade through those masses of managers and CEOs, and we will come and say hello. Please do go check out these.
Thank you so much. You do I watch you on LinkedIn. Both of you do incredible work. You are an inspiration, and I have to have you along to maybe my round table in May. Both of you.
Definitely. I remember that other one that I came down to, and I thought it was a very clever idea to drive to Buckinghamshire and back in one day. And I live in Blackpool, I will have you know, on the Fylde coast.
You're amazing, and again, that's one of our most successful roundtables. But we've got, and I will say very quickly, confirmed Nadra Hammett, Professor Martin Green, and quite a few others. We've got a couple of CEO care providers, and I'm extending tonight you two to come on the roundtable.
Thank you very much.
Ping us over the dates after the show, Jayne, and we'll see what we can make happen. Honestly, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. This is The Caring View, www.thecaringview.co.uk for all of our free resources. Go check out CCTV. Get in touch with Jayne after the show if this is something that you think you are going to benefit from, or even if you don't think you're going to benefit from it, but you want more answers, go and ask. I'm sure Jayne will be happy to help you no matter what. Until then, next week, back as always. Mark, what are we on next week? Help me out.
Next week, we are joined by Skills for Care. We're talking about their future workforce strategy. So we know that the government obviously announced that they're going to be looking at social care and the workforce plan alongside the NHS plan that came for 15 years. So, yeah, we're joined by Una Smith, the CEO, and Jayne Brightman that are going to come and talk about kind of
what the plan Jayne's is. Coming on.
Yeah.
I've not seen Jayne in ages.
Because Jayne's obviously now back at Skills for Care. So, yeah, they're going to come talk about, obviously, what the plan is, where they're currently at, and, yeah, just talk about maybe how providers can get involved and, yeah, that big all-important question around kind of funding from government and what that looks like.
Oh, beautiful. And I get to be on the show next week as well, which is, I'm not seeing Jayne in ages. Oh, it's bound to be a cracking show next week, as if we're not going to do a cracking show. So please do tune in, as always, 7:30 on YouTube. If you missed us, don't worry. All of our episodes are available on YouTube, and you can access them from www.thecaringview.co.uk. Yes, Jayne, keep up the good work. Thank you so much. Mark, amazing as always for keeping the engine running at The Caring View whilst I'm still finding my feet back in the world of social care. But until then, we will see you next week. Take care. Good night. God bless.
Bye-bye.
Bye.